Thank you, Vice Chair. I can confirm we are live.
Perfect, thank you. So welcome everyone to the Accessibility Advisory Committee electronic meeting, our first of the 2021 year, and I believe our second electronic meeting so far. So this meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001. And I will call upon the Deputy Clerk to conduct a roll call of the committee present.
Vice Chair Schumacher.
Present.
Member John Gallagher.
Present.
Member Lorraine Blondin.
Present.
Member Diane Lupton.
Present.
Member Laurel Shaw.
Present.
Member Kay Leslie.
Present.
And Chair Armour is absent.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Okay. So the clerk has put movers and seconders, most movers and seconders for the motions. If you do have any objections, please let us know throughout. So it is moved by Lorraine Blondin and seconded by Kay Leslie. It is recommended that the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting agenda dated January 26, 2021 be adopted and printed and circulated. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? No? None. There are no deputations today. So we will move forward to reports. And our first report is 5.1, Community Improvement Plan Update Accessibility Initiatives. Kirsten Maxwell.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you for having me. Sorry, my buttons were a little clicky there for a second. I was going to just speak about the changes we've made to the Community Improvement Plan Incentives bylaw. It actually was just adopted by council last night, so it's fresh. As part of the ongoing streetscape project that the town is working on, one of the aspects that we were looking at was what the Community Improvement Plan area, which is the downtown core, what the existing incentives were, what the uptake had been, and whether or not we could make any amendments to that and try and ensure that the businesses would have more opportunity to remain viable and to give them some other options when we were looking at incentives. And so what we did was the existing community improvement plan had a list of 8 different potential financial incentives that the town could implement in order to help businesses. And in 2012, when the original plan was done, they had chosen 4 programs that they thought would be appropriate and give businesses an opportunity to avail themselves. And since 2012, we really had no uptake on those original 4 programs. So what we decided this time around was to look at some of the other programs that we could avail ourselves of and implement those as well as the existing ones to provide businesses with more opportunity for being able to do anything along the grant line. So basically, the way it sits now, the 4 existing programs, sorry about that, include a tax increment equivalent grant program, development charge program, application and permit fee grant program, which would cover planning fees and demolition fees from the building department. And then a cash in lieu of program grant were all existing. And what we've done is we've added a couple of really, I think, more exciting programs. One is a facade and signage improvement grant, which would give a business owner the opportunity to redo their signage, and they would be eligible for a grant up to 50% of the cost, or $5,000. And then a second program that we installed or implemented was a landscape improvement grant that also would cover property improvement, like accessibility improvements and access to the buildings, as well as doing things with the physical space like landscaping and fencing and planters and things like that. And that program would be 50% of the eligible cost to a maximum of $2,000. So the existing programs were maintained, and then we added a couple extras. And that's basically where we're at. The program would involve, if anybody wanted to make use of one of the grants, they would have to submit an application and it would be reviewed and then approved. Or there would be discussion as to what would have to be done so the town could approve it. And they all are would be provided to the planning committee, is the body that would review them. So hopefully that gives you a bit of information as to what we're looking at, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Kirsten? I have one, Kirsten. So is this being presented? Sorry, is this being presented to the BIA so that they are aware that the businesses are able to, I know we just passed it at council last night. So is it going to be presented to the BIA so that they can talk to their businesses? I know there's a few that have like that one step that maybe we could, you know, create an accessible option for the store.
Absolutely. I know that the BIA was advised we were looking at it, but I don't know if it was discussed at any of their meetings in December, but I will make sure that they're aware that we have made these changes to the program and that they would now have the opportunity to avail themselves of any of those incentives.
Perfect. That's fine. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
And the next report, 5.2, is potential Center Street crossing update. Steve Hernan, Director Hernan, are you here?
Yep. Thank you, Chair Schumacher. So I'm just here to tell the committee that we've been instructed by council to look at a master plan for sidewalks. And actually tomorrow at committee, we're unveiling a very draft version of that, which will then be open for public comment on missing links and what we're proposing. Basically, we have a primary sidewalk system, a networking system or neighborhood system, and we've identified some missing links and crosswalks. Specific to your question on Center Street, the only things that we've identified there at this point in time is pedestrian crosswalk at Center and Haynes, and a pedestrian crosswalk of some description on Center Street by the Hunters Bay Trail. So it'd be on the south side of the Center Street Bridge. But I urge everybody after tomorrow at committee meeting or watch committee, there'll be a full explanation of it. And then the site will be live on the town's website. You'll be able to look at the mapping and you'll be able to see what we're thinking and what the plans are. And then obviously there'll be a survey to fill out and comment with any missing links that you feel, or any comments where you feel that sidewalks should be put or should not be put in. We're basically looked at our entire network. We looked at what we were trying to link, being shopping centers, retail areas, schools, churches, parks, and it came quite evident to us where the missing links were and what was required. But like I say, after tomorrow it goes out for public comment. I believe it's up for about 3.5 weeks where people can review the mapping and add their comments. And then from there, it'll be taken into advisement. And then another draft plan will be brought back for council sometime the month or so after that for approval. So that's what we've done with it. I know you've asked for a pedestrian crosswalk, I think right across from Legacy Lane. I can tell you that has not been factored into the plan at this time. Crossing a Legacy Lane there's no sidewalk on the other side. You're in an industrial area and it just does not make sense from our perspective, where we're trying to keep people out of the industrial areas. We're trying to get people safely to the retail areas and the town amenities, trails, schools, parks, things like that. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Director Hernan. Lorraine? Oh, you're on mute, Lorraine.
The Legacy Lane one not being considered at all, I guess that's a significant concern for our committee because we've identified that there are lots of residents there with mobility issues. You've got all the seniors housing right there and new housing going in, and people crossing that street to the Tim Hortons and the Home Depot. And I guess I'm concerned if the town is looking at sidewalks everywhere, but is not looking at that particular area. So, you know, residents do live there. There is commercial across the street that residents are crossing to. And our committee's identified that as a significant accessibility area concern and the need for sidewalks at a minimum in that area.
And fair comments, and by all means, you know, take the time to fill out the survey with your comments. My immediate response back to that is that's an industrial commercial area. So they're not designed for pedestrian traffic. There is no sidewalks once you cross the road in that area. So we'd be crossing somebody to an area where there is no sidewalks. Center and Haynes Street, we're looking at a safe crossing there. Likely you'll see a set of lights installed within the next, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years there, which might be solving the crosswalk problem. So I know you would never get another crosswalk that close to an existing set of traffic lights anyways. No engineer would support that. No traffic movement specialist would support that. So the best you would get, in all honesty, would be a crosswalk up on Center and Haynes Street. But there again, once you cross that road, there is no sidewalks. There is no sidewalks on that side of Center Street. There is no sidewalks up through Ott Drive through the industrial area. And that's why the draft plan as it shows today does not show anything up in that area. We're trying to link, like I say, the majority of the people to the areas they travel to. You know, there's a sidewalk on the other side of Center Street, which takes you down to the shopping area, the Walmart, the independent grocer, but no pedestrian traffic into Home Depot.
Kay, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I was just, thank you for that report. And I was just wondering if there is any plan at some point to put a sidewalk in on the other side of Center Street. I mean, there is a paved pathway at this point that goes down to toward the Independent. However, that light is very dangerous down there. And as was mentioned, it's impossible to cross because the cars coming north, I guess that is, or is that south? Sorry, up the hill, that use it as like an off ramp almost. So I just wondered if there are any plans to just make the whole area a little bit more accessible for seniors. As was mentioned, we have now 15 new homes that went in over the winter, just near Chartwell, and there are more going in as I speak. So just wondering if, I appreciate that there may be a light in a couple of years down at Haynes Road. But at this point, seniors are trying to cross because, they either can't walk that far, or once they do cross, it's also difficult with no sidewalk to go, into the retail area. So just wondering if there's any plan to make the area a little bit more accessible, to access both the grocery stores and the Tim Hortons and Home Depot.
Okay, so once again, if you're talking Ott Drive, the industrial commercial area, there is no, at this point in time, staff is not recommending any sidewalks be put into industrial commercial areas. We do recognize, once again, the Center and Haynes Road crossing needs improvements made to it, whether it's just a pedestrian crossing or a full set of traffic lights is yet to be determined. But this is a draft plan which is open for comment. But to cross people at Legacy Lane, you're dumping them on a road. There is no sidewalk on the other side. The side with all the housing where the senior residence is on has got a sidewalk. As you know, it was paved last fall, the one stretch of it. So there is a safe access point on the side of on the road where the residents live, which will take them down to town, or will take them into the bottom of Center Street down towards the independent grocer Walmart area.
Thank you. Member Leslie, are you able to turn on your video?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess.
No worries.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Um,
I have a question.
Is it on?
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Yes, it is. Thanks, Kay.
Okay.
Yes, Member Gallagher.
Thanks. Steve, with the intersection at Haynes and Center Street, on the east side of Center from Haynes going north, it's a larger road surface there. Is there plans maybe for doing what the district does and widening out the asphalt surface in that area and getting around the corner to Tim Hortons there? And second to that question, with all that development that was going on at Legacy, at one time there was a discussion of a trail heading down the hill towards where the back of the Jeep dealership is. Was that ever finalized on any site plans, or did they not decide to move through with the access down there?
So there is consideration being given to a sidewalk on the side of Haynes Road where you're describing, John. But once again, it would stop down before you get across the tracks and probably double back in on Silver Street as you're back into an industrial area, and we don't want to put pedestrian traffic down there. All preliminary, and we are looking for access to the ball diamonds, and we figure that could be a jump off area down there somewhere to get under the highway bridge. In regards to the area of development you're talking, which is under development right now, there is discussions right now with the developers, but that's all private land, and there is an easement, a small town easement for a trail through there, but it would basically serve the condo development, and it wouldn't serve the greater population. So we're not really looking at that as our access point. We're looking at our access point more being on Haynes Road and Center Street, if you will.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hernan, and we'll look forward to your report tomorrow.
Thank you.
Next is report number 5.3, DEV 2021-10 accessible taxis. And Andrew, I believe you're here. And just so you are aware, some of the members did mention they weren't able to access the report earlier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did catch that note and don't know what happened there, but I've got my report here with some notes, so I'll just go ahead. So back in the September meeting of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, staff was asked to come back with a report outlining three things. The first being a potential for a bylaw amendment to address the accessibility requirements. The second, the ability for the municipality to require accessible taxis. And third, the potential incentives for taxi companies to operate accessible taxis in the town of Huntsville. So to address the first point, a bylaw amendment is totally possible. Any bylaw can be changed at any time with bringing to a committee, then committee authorizing that and taking it to council. Unfortunately, right now, there are, and I have to always think about this, 23 charges against one of the taxi companies, 2 under the zoning bylaw and the remainder under our current taxi bylaw. So as it sits right now with the matters before the courts, the bylaw cannot be changed. This has been ongoing for over a year now because of COVID. It was a year ago, November, I believe, when I first laid the charges, and we're still waiting to get to court. Sorry, someone's calling me. I'm just going to mute that. Okay. So the second point is the ability for the municipality to require accessible taxis. So under the IASR, there is a requirement for the municipality, because we do license taxis, to ensure that the taxi companies do not charge more or higher fare to a person with a disability to a person not with a disability. I've spoken with both taxi companies at least twice in my 15 years of being with the bylaw department for the town of Huntsville. And currently, as it sits, I believe only the one company has an accessible vehicle to be able to take a wheelchair right on and right inside. So there's really only the one option. And again, I have spoken to both companies a couple times about the rates, the fares that they can and cannot charge when using that vehicle. And the third point, incentives. So there was in the past, I believe it was both federal and provincial incentives for a taxi company to apply for to offset the costs of purchasing a vehicle, operating a vehicle, maintenance of a vehicle that was deemed to be an accessible vehicle. To the best of my knowledge, neither one of the taxi companies in town took advantage of that. Not even trying to apply, as far as I understand, for any federal or provincial funding to offset their costs related to that. And I think that's it. So if anyone has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Andrew? It was pretty much a report for information only, but by all means. Ask. Member Shaw.
Does that kind of just mean too bad? Like, does that mean we're not getting an accessible taxi with all our options used up?
No, I believe one taxi company, and Crystal's okay if I name them. The one who has the accessible vehicle? I don't know.
I will defer that to your director. I believe she's present here. Thank you.
Yes, she is.
I don't think there'd be an issue in naming them.
The company that has one?
Yeah.
Okay, so the company that I believe currently has an accessible taxi is Al's Taxi. And I believe it's a white van. They also use it for other things, but I do believe it's still available for accessibility reasons.
So they are charging the regular price then?
They know that they are supposed to charge the regular rate. If someone with a person with a disability or a person, an able-bodied person, it's the same price. They can't charge more for one or the other.
So, and if I were to take it and they wanted to charge me more, would I come to you?
So that's where it gets a little foggy for me, if you will. The IASR does very specifically state that they cannot charge more. I don't have a fine or a charge, a penalty to give to them if in fact they do that. So I'm not 100%. Sorry?
Take them to court too. I don't know. I don't know. It just seems.
So if
you can't enforce it.
So if I could rephrase that, I don't have the tools to enforce that. Now, the IASR being a regulation under the AODA, I'm not an expert, but I believe there may be some other government agency who could lay charges under that. I'm just not sure 100% who they are.
Member Gallagher first and then Member London.
Andrew, is there a possibility to include that in the taxi and limousine licensing bylaw? Because once it's established by law, then they would be applicable, no?
Sorry, John, was that to put a fine in the bylaw?
With respect to the pay being the same, having it front and center mechanism, if it were put in a zoning or in the taxi bylaw, that would say, should the operator be caught charging more money, there's fines up to this or that.
Absolutely. Wording could be added to the taxi bylaw exactly to state what you're saying. No company shall charge more for a person with a disability to use the accessible taxi. And there could be a fine associated with that under the bylaw, for sure.
Member Blondin, did you still have a question or was it answered? You're on mute again, Lorraine.
sort of answered, but as a next step, can we as a committee then propose that we would like to have an amendment made to the taxi licensing bylaw to add the fine component? Is that the next step?
So I believe, Lorraine, what Andrew is saying is right now, because there are some pending issues before the court, we can't touch the current bylaw. Once that is resolved, then it will be actually on our agenda as a committee to look at. Council has an ongoing policy to review bylaws. So notwithstanding, it is one of the ones that we know through Director Maxwell. I'm sure it's on their radar in that department to take a look at it, because it has come across the agenda here on a couple of occasions and a couple meetings. So we know we want to get to it. We just have to wait till we can legally do so. Is that the correct answer, I think?
Can we then just have it as a follow-up item for us to ensure that that happens?
Yes, I mean, I believe it will be on our radar to do. Do we have to make a motion or anything, Crystal, or is it just, yeah, through you, Crystal?
No, I will make sure that as soon as we are able to address that bylaw, and as soon as Andrew is looking at that bylaw, that we make sure it's back on the agenda here. So that is 100% on the radar for this committee.
Perfect. Thank you, Clerk. Does anyone have anything else for Andrew? Or we can take him off the hot seat. You're good. Thank you, Andrew. I do appreciate it. And yeah, if we could figure out that issue with your attachment somehow, one version it wouldn't open, and some maybe we can connect with Crystal later. Some members were having difficulty opening the attachments or the agenda.
I will look into it and get it resolved. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're on to report 5.4, community planning permit update and site plan checklist update. I believe Curtis and Chris are both here. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of committee, thank you for inviting Chris and I to speak with you regarding the draft accessibility checklist. Through this presentation, we're just hoping to provide you with an overview of how the accessibility checklist can be incorporated into present and future development approvals, and provide you with a brief overview on the next steps for the checklist. So I'm going to take a step back. In March of 2020, Council directed staff to undertake a work program to develop a community planning permit bylaw. And before I proceed, I'm going to quickly share my screen. And really what this is a planning tool that provides an alternative to traditional planning, the traditional planning approval framework, and would replace the town's current zoning bylaw. So without getting into it too much, a CPP bylaw combines a number of traditional approvals such as zoning, site plans, and the committee should be familiar with site plans. It's one of the applications that the committee reviews for accessibility compliance, and minor variances, and it combines all those into one application with a shorter approval timeline. I'm just going to skip down here. So on the screen, there's basically a timeline of where we are in the process. So we are in phase 3, community stakeholder consultation. And some key things planned during this phase will be a focus on public education on what a community planning permit system is, and seeking feedback from public and stakeholders to establish their visions for the project. As this relates to accessibility, staff will be seeking the AAC's feedback during this process, and will ultimately be crafting policies that meet the intent of our official plan, and that create opportunities for inclusiveness in order to create a community free from restrictions. So our parking and site design standards, which are really sort of at the core of what's in the accessibility guidelines, will be reviewed, and elements of that checklist will potentially be incorporated into the new community planning permit system bylaw, where applicable. So lastly, while the CPPS process moves forward, we have an opportunity to continue to improve the accessibility checklist and to include the final product, the final version of the accessibility checklist as an appendix within the community planning permit system application package. So when somebody comes forward to develop a property, they'll have the complete community planning, or excuse me, accessibility checklist, and be able to check off how they are achieving the goals that we set forward. And so just a reminder for committee, the accessibility checklist, which I know you've all reviewed with us last year. It's funny to say that. It doesn't seem like it, but last year, it included the requirements under the OBC and AOTA, as well as the committee's sort of best practice suggestions. So I think we're in the process of currently review, or we collectively are in the process of currently reviewing those. So, the last thing I wanted to touch on was just a shameless plug. A survey was recently added to myhuntsville.ca respecting the community planning permit system. And through that survey, we'll be seeking feedback that will help shape the overall objectives of the bylaw and will help us understand the needs and concerns of our residents and stakeholders as it pertains to development in Huntsville. So I would strongly encourage all of you to visit myhuntsville.ca and complete the survey and provide the much needed feedback to us on areas of improvement. So with that, I will turn it over to the Chief Building Official, Christopher Nagy, and he will provide some comments on the next steps for the accessibility checklist.
So thank you very much, Curtis. That was a great summary and everything. And thank you, committee, for again having us this afternoon. Really, what I wanted to kind of put back to committee is, as Curtis said, we kind of brought a draft checklist to committee last year with the hopes that, as a committee, you guys would sit down and actually go through some asks and create that best practice section of that checklist. And as our director, Kirsten Maxwell, noted, through the CPP and the development of grants and things like that, we definitely want to kind of use this tool with the new community planning permit to create a voice for those best practices for this committee, right? So we're hoping that as a committee you again look at that checklist and kind of come up with more best practices, and we'll, as staff, we'd be happy to review what your proposals are and everything like that, and make sure that they aren't overlapping legislative requirements. But we're really looking at this committee to come up with those measures. So that's really what I wanted to highlight at this point. And Curtis and I are here for any questions or comments. So yeah.
Does the committee have any questions for Curtis or Chris? And everyone has been reviewing that. Please, that is the point of the checklist, is to review it and give feedback, obviously, to the planning department. Okay.
And
I guess.
one comment, if I could. Really, more than just review the checklist, because I think we were all somewhat happy with the layout and everything, but more, if we could get more content within that checklist, that would be what we're looking for as staff at this point, right? So yeah.
And if I can build on that even,
Sure.
Really, I think the way to think of it is we have the legislative requirements of AOTA, the OBOA, all the other legislations, and we can easily, like, we have listed those requirements as they pertain to development in the checklist. But I think we have an opportunity to also highlight, and this is really the focus, is highlighting the best practices section and pulling information. So we can make recommendations, things that we can't necessarily enforce, but it's, you know, some people I think just aren't aware of things that they could do better, right? Whether it's, if it's a railing height or if it's, you know, making a ramp longer, so the incline is less steep, right? There's the minimums, but they may not necessarily reflect the best practice, or, you know, what works best for individuals. So I think that's an opportunity, and really what could be a really important part of that checklist is providing the best practice, or updating the best practices section with the community or the committee's feedback, and of course, like Chris just said, identifying additional areas that or additional things that we can include in the checklist to really make it comprehensive. So,
Member Blondin.
Remember to unmute myself this time. Obviously, as the one who was doing the site plans, I would be the best person to, and I created the original draft of the checklist. Obviously, I'm the best person to review it. But as you know, I've been battling cancer, and that battle is not over. So right now, it's just not something I can even take on. However, I'm wondering, can we ask Debbie to look at this, or is this still considered confidential because it's within the committee? Can we ask an outside person who's very experienced and did all the training for me, if she could look at this before it goes out to the public or used within the township's offices? Just a question.
that is a wonderful question. Through you, Madam Chair, I perhaps will direct the question to Mr. Nagy or our director, Kirsten, just seeking their feedback, or perhaps even Crystal could answer the question as to the procedure for including a member outside of the committee and town staff in the process. So I just want to make sure I answer the committee fairly and correctly. So.
Crystal, you want to take that one?
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
Thank you. So I would recommend at this time, I think when the checklist came forward last time, committee had taken a look at the checklist, staff had kind of brought forward. I think at this point, it would be best that I can send it out again. All of the committee members can take a look at it. And I think it's absolutely appropriate to reach out to any members of the community within your communities that could add to it, and seeking more information. I don't think hurts at all. It's going to better the outcome for our community as a whole. So I absolutely think it's appropriate to reach out to anyone in our community who might be able to provide some more feedback.
Okay, and through you, Madam Chair, if I could add to that, just to clarify too, Ms. Kerwin has provided feedback on the initial draft, or sorry, on the most recent draft that committee's seen. She was provided a copy and has given us comments, and we can, we'll think of the best way to provide that to committee, so you can perhaps see whether it's, we will update the draft with Ms. Kerwin's suggestions, or perhaps we'll send the original and a version with her comments so you could review both. We'll figure out what's easiest and most easy to digest, because obviously we don't want to make more work for you. So.
Thank you, Curtis. And I guess if I may add, I think to some extent too, what you guys are looking for, and not to put you on the spot, Kay, but I know you have shared before with someone with a visual impairment that sometimes a change in color within a building, those sort of best practice nuances that maybe, you know, aren't in the AODA and aren't in compliance pieces, but as a town, we want to do better, right? As a town of Huntsville, we want to do better. And I know one of the things that I brought up as a council member and as a member of this committee, when we were looking at redoing Kent Park, and there was a marbling component within that, the underlying sort of the granite feature or whatever that we were looking at. And again, it was my sort of thought to bring forward, is that going to affect how people are able to walk through Kent Park if there are varying degrees of light and dark shade within, you know, that sort of foundation component that we put there, right? So those are those pieces that I believe Chris and Curtis are looking for, is those little nuances that, you know, as we are the ones navigating our community, what are those best practice pieces that don't necessarily, yeah, we can follow AODA and, you know, all of those status quo pieces that we do, but as a town of Huntsville, we want to do that much better, and we want those best practice pieces so that it is a viable community for everybody to be able to navigate. Would I have said that properly, Chris, Curtis?
Absolutely, Chair Schumacher. That's exactly what we are looking for, and you know, gaining the experience and expertise of this group to share with future developers that are coming forth to our community. Right. So you hit all the keynotes in that statement, and that's exactly what we're striving for. So yeah.
So yeah, if we can maybe take a moment and go back, as Crystal said, she's going to send out that checklist again, look at it from that sort of keen eye with, you know, that look at how it is that we navigate our community, and be able to give Chris and Curtis and the planning department sort of those best practice nuances to make Huntsville the community we want to see.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, if I may just have one more comment, and I think best practice is really to, there's a bit of flexibility because they're not, just so the committee feels comfortable going forward. You know, the best practices are really just, like you said, things that aren't covered in regulation, or they're improvements on the existing regulations. So they're more like suggestions or strong recommendations to developers of things we want
nice to have.
So nice to have. So we have a bit of freedom in that, I think, in the recommendations we do make. So just keep that in mind, so nobody feels, you know, overwhelmed and thinking they have to know exactly what the letter of the law says, because that we are also going to be including that in the checklist itself, saying this is the minimum by law, you have to do this, and then, you know, the other side of the coin is, this is, if you did this, that would be, you know, the gold standard, and you get a gold star from us. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys again.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time, Madam Chair, members of committee. I appreciate it.
And
Thank you.
be sure to check out the survey, the community planning process.
Absolutely right. Thank you.
So then report number 6.1, site plan review. Councillor Armour is not here. Is someone else able, Crystal? So I can do it then. Site plan review, SPA 123-2020, THE 295 Highway 60. A verbal update, Crystal, do you have that?
I'm sorry, I do not have a verbal update for that. However, I did want to pass along sincere apologies from Councillor Armour, who could not be here. As you all know, he is a paramedic and was indeed called out. So he sends his sincere regrets. In regards to the site plan review, I would recommend at this time, if everyone's okay with it, that we just move that matter to our next agenda.
Okay. We are on to number 7, new business. And I might hijack this one. And you can slap my hand after, Crystal. And so this might be something that we are, because I did have a call out from a couple of members of the community who want to discuss some things. So I know I had approached Brenda. The O fountains have been passed by council, and we are having refill stations. A couple of them we have, it's already the committee's council has had a committee report presented to us from the BIA and the hub. But I guess there are some questions around accessibility of an O fountain and a refill station. I've been trying to do my due diligence to sort of come up with, and I can, and I see that Kirsten's left, but maybe it is something that we can look at for our next meeting, is where there are some regulations around those O fountains that we have agreed to purchase as a town and how accessible they can be or what the requirement needs to be for them to be accessible. I know both Bram and Morgan are willing to come and present, but they have already presented at a council meeting. But I think the key piece for them is the accessibility piece of those O fountains. So if we can maybe take a look at that. Member Gallagher, if you have any thoughts on that, that would be great.
Thanks. I had thought of this when they were doing that presentation at Kent Park. As you may or may not know, I designed the original Kent Park when it was a gas station, and then we did the first park there. As part of the first park design, where the vehicles leave the driveway heading onto Main Street, just to the left of it, there was actually a fountain there. So there's actually a water line underneath with a shutoff valve right in that location. And I didn't get it out because I didn't attend any meeting on Kent Park, but that would be an ideal location because it's at grade. And again, the design of the actual facility we'll have to look into, but just wanted to let you know that there is a water line and a shutoff right there for the previous fountain that was there. Thanks.
Interesting to note. Member Blondin, did you have your hand up?
No.
No, okay. So yeah, just something maybe we can look at for the next agenda. And then lastly, and Jen does apologize because I did send her the deputation, but she misunderstood it and thought it was to present at full council. So with community living, we are looking at creating a welcoming community social innovation initiative. It's in its infancy stages, and she's looking for members who would like to join this committee. The initiative is mobilizing members of our community to form a task force. It's all virtual. Mayor Terziano and Deputy Mayor Alcock are aware that we're looking at this. They want to create one with about 8 to 10 diverse people who represent an array of differences that make up our community. And together we'd establish a series of platforms and what it means to be a welcoming community where everyone belongs. We could define the qualities of a welcoming community and identify core values and behaviors that would represent our mission. And so the idea is to create this community of a diverse group of people, and sort of what is then that acceptable standard that we create from a welcoming community. So I will pass on in an email Jen's contact if anyone to this committee, and if anyone is interested in joining that initiative. I know she is looking for people to move this initiative forward. Those are my 2 items. Okay. Any other general information? No? Seeing none, then it is moved by John Gallagher and seconded by Diane Lupton that we now adjourn at 2:34 p.m. All in favor? I'm so used to doing that. Okay. Next meeting is March, I believe, unless we call another one. March 24th, 23rd?
Correct, March 23rd at 1:30.
Next meeting, March 23rd at 1:30. Okay. Thank you all